Lagos is a city that never sleeps, a place where dreams are born and crushed in the same breath. My mother, Mama Elizabeth, was one of those people who believed that faith could conquer anything. A single mother raising me, her only child, she clung to God like a lifeline. God never abandons his children, she always said, her voice full of conviction. But sometimes I wondered if he had abandoned me. It started subtly at first, restless nights, waking up drenched in sweat. But then it escalated. Dark shadows filled my dreams, whispering my name, their voices chilling and suffocating. Soon, I was plagued by fainting spells during the day, my body growing weaker with each passing week. Mama was certain it was spiritual. The devil is attacking you because you're destined for greatness, she told me one morning, her hands gripping my trembling shoulders. But we won't let him win. We'll fight this. And fight we did. Mama dragged me from one church to another, from prayer vigils to loud deliverance sessions. Pastors and prophets laid hands on me, shouting in tongues, sprinkling holy water as I stood in the middle of it all, feeling like I was drowning. Nothing changed. If anything, I felt worse. Then one Sunday evening, she came home beaming, her eyes alight with hope. "Grace, God has heard our prayers," she announced, her voice trembling with excitement. I looked up from my spot on the worn-out couch, exhaustion etched into my face. "What is it, Mama?" "I spoke to Archbishop Mark," she said, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "The man of God himself. He's coming to Lagos for a special program, and he agreed to pray for you personally." I froze. Everyone in Nigeria knew Archbishop Mark. He wasn't just a pastor. He was a legend, a towering figure with a commanding presence. He was said to have healed the sick, restored sight to the blind, and even raised the dead. People traveled from across the country just to see him. Mama dropped to her knees beside me. "Grace, this is it. God is about to deliver you. You have to trust him." I nodded, though unease coiled in my stomach like a snake. When the day finally arrived, our small apartment was buzzing with activity. Mama cleaned every corner, even scrubbing the walls, as though preparing for the second coming of Christ. When Archbishop Mark stepped through our door, it felt like the room shrank. He was taller than I'd expected, his pristine white cassock glowing in the dim light of our sitting room. His eyes were sharp, piercing, and they seemed to see right through me. "Sister Elizabeth," he said, his deep, commanding voice filling the room. "God has seen your faith. He will reward you." Mama dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, man of God. Thank you for coming to help my daughter." He smiled and placed a hand on her head. "Rise, woman. God has already begun his work." Then he turned to me. "Grace," he said, his tone softer now, "you've been through so much. But don't worry. God will set you free." I wanted to believe him, but something about his gaze made me shiver. The first prayer session was intense. He laid his hands on my head, chanting prayers that echoed in the small room. Mama watched from the corner, her hands clasped tightly in prayer. "You are carrying a heavy burden," he said after a while, his voice low and serious. "This kind of deliverance requires deep spiritual intervention. I'll need to see her alone for the next sessions." Mama hesitated but nodded. Anything to save my daughter. That was how it began. The first few private sessions seemed normal enough. He prayed over me, anointed my forehead with oil, and spoke words of encouragement. But then the prayers started to change. One day, he placed his hand on my shoulder, his touch lingering. "Grace," he said, his voice low, "the devil uses beauty to corrupt. You must be careful not to tempt men with your appearance." I blinked, confused. "Tempt men? I don't understand." He smiled. "It's not your fault. The devil is cunning. But I'll help you." The next time, his hands wandered lower. He said he needed to anoint my chest, my stomach, my thighs. I wanted to protest, but his voice was soothing, his words laced with authority. "This is part of the deliverance," he assured me. I felt dirty, ashamed, but I couldn't tell Mama. She trusted him completely, and I didn't want to shatter her faith. One day, during another session, he went further. His prayers turned into murmurs, then commands. He told me to remove my blouse. When I hesitated, he frowned. "Do you want to be free or not?" "I do," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Then trust me," he said. "This is for your salvation." I obeyed, my heart pounding. What followed was something I still can't fully process. He touched me in ways that made my skin crawl, whispering that this was the only way to rid me of the darkness inside. When it was over, he handed me an envelope filled with money. "For your troubles," he said with a smile. "And remember, this is between us. If you tell anyone, the devil will use your words to destroy what God is doing in your life. And if that happens," he leaned in closer, his voice a whisper, "you won't like the consequences." I stared at him, too scared to speak. The sessions continued. Each time, he went further. Each time, I felt more broken. He always gave me money afterward, always warned me to keep quiet. "No one will believe you," he said once. "Do you think your mother would ever turn against me? I'm a man of God." I knew he was right. Mama adored him, believed he was saving me. How could I tell her the truth? One night, after another session, I finally broke. I sat in our living room, clutching the latest envelope of money, my body trembling. "Mama," I said quietly. "Yes, Grace." She was humming at him, her mood lighter than it had been in months. "I need to tell you something." She looked at me, concerned. "What is it?" "It's about Archbishop Mark." Her face lit up. "What about him? Isn't he wonderful? God is really using him." "No, Mama," I said, my voice cracking. He's been hurting me." Her smile faded. "Hurting you? What do you mean?" I swallowed hard, tears spilling down my cheeks. "He's been touching me. 4 months now. He forces me to." My voice broke. "Mama, he's not who you think he is." Her face contorted with confusion, then disbelief. "Grace, stop this nonsense. Do you know what you're saying? That man is a servant of God. I'm telling the truth." I cried, pulling out the envelopes. "Look, this is the money he's been giving me to keep quiet." She stared at the money, her hands shaking. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked to her room, locking the door behind her. It's been a year since that night. Mama and I barely speak. She spends her days in church, still praying for me, still believing in Archbishop Mark. And me? I'm just trying to survive, haunted by his threats, his touch, his voice. Some nights, I lie awake and wonder if I'll ever be free.